Chapter 12. The next morning, Sumiko jumped out of bed to peek out the front door and see if the camp looked just the way she thought it had yesterday. For some reason, she didn't know what to expect this morning. When she stepped out, not a thing had changed. Stables lined the outer wall, and barracks filled the center of the camp. Japanese people walked here and there, some of them looking dazed. So they really were here, in a town enclosed by stone walls, and almost everybody else was out there. It all reminded her of something, but she couldn't remember what. Then she remembered. The place was like the dioramas her class had made for geography once. The class had formed groups, and each group had made a diorama of life in a different country. That was a lot of fun, a good memory from school. Sumiko had helped make the Paraguay diorama. The teacher said all the kids did a great job. But now Sumiko thought that if you had enlarged all the dioramas, there would have been things missing, like curtains, pets, and gardens. Details. Those details were also missing from the assembly center. The bell sounded for breakfast. Throngs of kids were already running toward the mess hall and shouting. Breakfast was about 2 tablespoons of scrambled eggs and 2 pieces of bacon the size of postage stamps. All the kids ate ravenously and then ran like mad to another mess hall to get more. Sumiko grabbed Tak-Tak and ran with the other kids. After breakfast, they took a walk, Tak-Tak holding tightly to Sumiko's blouse. As they walked, Sumiko saw that many people had left their doors open for ventilation. So many cots filled with some of the rooms in the barracks that there was no place to walk. The walls didn't extend all the way up, and you could see the beams in the ceilings. In one barrack, 3 giggling boys were climbing across the beams, peering into other people's homes. "That looks fun," Tak-Tak said hopefully. "I don't think we're supposed to do that." "Will they shoot us?" "Stop saying that. It's bad luck." Sumiko opened the door to a barrack with a sign reading Recreation. Inside, she saw an empty room with a few tables. Seeing the empty room filled her with fear of something Jishan had once described to her. He had been sick, and he tended to ramble when he was sick. Sumiko had been sitting with him as he told her about the trip from Japan to America. "I don't see sky for many long time. I feel close to ultimate boredom. That mean close to lose mind. Inside myself, I feel like screaming. Outside myself, I feel calm." He said the thing that kept everybody going was a single word: America. That word was the most important thing his family owned, the only thing of value they possessed. Day after day, Sumiko felt as if she were living on the edge of the ultimate boredom. Some days she stayed inside the stable. Other days she wandered aimlessly. Once, as she and Tak-Tak wandered, she heard people rushing through the aisles hissing. "The soldiers are checking for illegal sewing scissors." She saw a woman screaming as soldiers ransacked her barrack. Sumiko thought of her yellow knife and felt almost faint with fear as she ran to stable floor. She could hear Tak-Tak calling behind her. "Where are we going?" Auntie watched uncomprehendingly as Sumiko ransacked her own luggage, found the knife, and ran outside. She stopped just long enough to snap at Tak-Tak. "You stay here." She ran and ran, finally stopping at the other end of the racetrack, where she found a patch of dirt. She was drenched in sweat from running. She dug a hole and rammed her knife inside before walking back, trying to appear calm. She promised herself never to mention the knife to anyone. Sumiko's next big surprise came a few days later when she noticed Mrs. Ono sobbing while holding a letter. "Mrs. Ono, can I help?" Sumiko asked. Mrs. Ono couldn't stop crying as she waved the note in the air. She held on to Sumiko and sobbed and laughed. Sumiko took the note and read it. "Dear Mrs. Ono, I hope this letter reaches you and would appreciate your letting me know. I am the new resident of your house. I wish to let you know that I will be caring for your dog until your release. Please do not worry, as he is in good hands during these difficult times. Yours truly, Mrs. Julia Donnell. Reading the letter was like seeing the sky. Sumiko thought about the woman all day. It gave her so much hope. It seemed like a miracle. One day, Sumiko sneaked back to where she'd buried her knife. She dug it up and scratched off her name before burying it again. Otherwise, every day was the same. Oh, there were more room searches, and there were electrical blackouts, and the kids were going wild. But for Sumiko, whether their barracks was dark or light didn't change her life much. Whether their barrack was ransacked by soldiers didn't change her life at all. They had nothing to hide anymore. Then, one evening in late May, Ichiro ran inside and said, "My friend says the camp paper is going to announce tomorrow that the government will start moving us all to a permanent relocation center." The next day, camp was in bedlam, people standing in the aisles shouting and discussing and debating and crying. The paper announced that several hundred to 1,000 people would be shipped out at a time. Sumiko's family was on the list of those leaving first. The next day, she came across some kids she didn't know climbing a ladder up a roof. She hesitated. Ladders were probably forbidden. But then she couldn't resist, and she clambered up behind them. As she neared the top, she saw the kids gaping at something. She hurried up and saw what they saw. It was something amazing. Normal life. Cars drove, people walked, trees swayed in the wind. A couple of the kids on the roof started crying. Sumiko just stared in amazement. Later, when she got back to the stable, her family was packing. They'd found out the next day they were being shipped to Poston, Arizona. The only thing anyone seemed to know about Poston was that it was very hot there. She thought about the coats and sweaters that had filled the meager space in their suitcases. Her uncle and grandfather didn't have clothes for cold weather, and Sumiko, Tak-Tak, Auntie, Bull, and Ichiro didn't have clothes for warm weather. So as before, when she left the farm, she now found herself almost liking what she thought she had hated. Here the weather was mild. Poston would be hot. Here life was predictable. She didn't know what Poston would be like. Here she had started to feel safe. Who knew what would happen to them in Poston? Her family walked through the aisles carrying their things. The camp was like a maze, with only the sun to tell Sumiko which way they were going. The nearer they got to the entrance gate, the more people joined them. Ichiro and Bull walked ahead, carrying the bulk of the family's belongings. Sumiko was so worried that she thought she could explode. "Ichiro!" Ichiro stopped and turned to her. "Is it better to go or to stay here?" "I have no idea," he said tiredly, and began walking again. As they walked, more and more people joined them. About 1,000 Nikki waited with their possessions at the gate. Hundreds of others had gathered to watch them leave. Sumiko walked through the gate and thought about her knife. Maybe 100 years from that moment, someone would dig it up. But probably nobody would ever see it again.